Most people remember Blazing Saddles for its outrageous jokes, fearless satire, and the moment cowboys around a campfire changed comedy forever with a scene Hollywood had never dared to show before. But buried beneath the laughs is a much stranger story. A story filled with deleted scenes that were almost too shocking to exist, casting disasters that nearly shut the production down, and one accidental blooper that somehow made it into the final shot without anyone planning it. For decades, audiences believed they had seen everything the film had to offer. After all, Blazing Saddles never tried to hide its chaos. It broke rules, mocked conventions, and even shattered the fourth wall in one of the most surreal endings ever put on screen. But the deeper you look into how the movie was made, the more unbelievable the story becomes. Why did the studio panic after seeing the finished film? What controversial scene was quietly removed before audiences ever saw it? And how did a random stranger walking past the set accidentally become part of movie history? The answers reveal a film that was far more dangerous, more chaotic, and more revolutionary than most people realize. When Blazing Saddles arrived in theaters in 1974, audiences weren't quite sure how to react. Some people laughed uncontrollably. Others sat in stunned silence. A few even walked out of the theater entirely. That reaction wasn't surprising. The film didn't just parody westerns, it attacked them head-on. For decades, Hollywood westerns had followed a familiar formula. The brave white hero rides into town. The villains are obvious. Justice is simple, and the world feels clean and heroic. Blazing Saddles took that formula and completely demolished it. The story seems simple on the surface. A corrupt land developer wants to force settlers out of a small frontier town called Rock Ridge, so he can buy the land cheaply. His plan is ridiculous but clever. Convince the governor to appoint a black sheriff, expecting the town's racist residents to panic and abandon the area. Instead, the new sheriff, Bart, turns out to be smarter than everyone else in the room. What begins as a cruel political trick slowly transforms into something else entirely. Rebellion against ignorance, prejudice, and the ridiculous myths Hollywood had spent decades building around the Old West. But the movie wasn't really about cowboys at all. It was about America. In the early 1970s, the country was in turmoil. The Vietnam War had ended in humiliation. The Watergate scandal was unraveling the presidency. Public trust in institutions had collapsed. And while the civil rights movement had achieved historic legal victories, racism still shaped everyday life. Hollywood often avoided confronting these realities directly. Mel Brooks decided to do the opposite. Instead of preaching, he used comedy as a weapon. Blazing Saddles exposed racism by exaggerating it to the point of absurdity. The film forced audiences to laugh at ideas that had once been treated as normal, and in doing so, it revealed just how ridiculous those ideas really were. But creating a movie this bold came with enormous risks, and from the very beginning, the production was walking on a tightrope. For a film already packed with controversial jokes, it's surprising to learn that one of the most outrageous scenes never made it into the movie at all. The moment was originally planned during the flirtation between Sheriff Bart and the glamorous singer Lily Von Stupp. In the final version of the film, their interaction is playful and suggestive, but still relatively tame compared to what had originally been written. In an earlier version of the scene, Lily begins teasing Bart about a long-standing stereotype about black men. The question is delivered with exaggerated curiosity, her voice dripping with playful disbelief. Then the lights go out, the screen fades to black, and in the darkness, her voice asks the question again, wondering if the stereotype is really true. There's a pause, just enough silence to make the audience uncomfortable. Then Bart calmly replies with a perfectly timed line that flips the entire joke on its head. According to Mel Brooks, the punchline was hilarious, but it also crossed into territory he wasn't sure audiences were ready for. Brooks later admitted that he ultimately decided to remove the scene, fearing that it might distract from the satire and overshadow the rest of the film. Even for a movie willing to push boundaries, this moment felt like it might go too far. But that wasn't the only idea that ended up on the cutting room floor. Early script drafts included even more aggressive versions of the scene, where Lily's curiosity about Bart's supposed attributes became increasingly direct. In one version, the conversation moved toward physical comedy that would have taken the joke to an entirely different level. Those scenes were never filmed, and yet the fact that they were even considered reveals just how fearless the writing process had been. Mel Brooks and his team weren't interested in playing it safe. They wanted to challenge audiences, provoke reactions, and tear down the polite boundaries that had long controlled Hollywood storytelling. The fact that some of these ideas were eventually removed doesn't mean the film became safe. It simply means the creators knew exactly where the edge was and how close they were standing to it. One of the most famous moments in Blazing Saddles happens around a campfire. A group of cowboys sits together after dinner, eating beans and relaxing under the open sky. It looks like a typical Western scene. Then someone passes gas. Then another. And another. Within seconds, the quiet campfire gathering becomes a symphony of ridiculous sound effects. Today, the scene feels silly but harmless. But in 1974, it was shocking. No major Hollywood movie had ever included audible flatulence as a central joke. Studio executives were horrified. They believed the scene was crude, childish, and embarrassing. Some even insisted it would ruin the film's reputation. Mel Brooks refused to remove it. In fact, after early test screenings, he did something even more unexpected. When audiences laughed so loudly that they drowned out the final line of the joke, Brooks returned to the editing room and added even more sound effects to extend the gag. His reasoning was simple. Westerns had spent decades presenting cowboys as noble, clean, heroic figures. But real cowboys were just people. They ate beans. They slept outside. And sometimes they did exactly what the characters were doing in that scene. By reducing the myth of the heroic cowboy to something hilariously human, Brooks shattered another Hollywood illusion. But the campfire scene wasn't the only moment where chaos shaped the film. In the movie's climactic finale, the story completely abandons the Old West setting. A massive brawl erupts and spills out of the fictional town, smashing through studio sets and into the real world. Actors crash through sound stages. They interrupt a musical number on another set. Eventually, the chaos spills onto the streets of Hollywood itself. The sequence is intentionally ridiculous, but in the middle of this madness, something unexpected happened. As the actors run out of the studio gate and into the street, a man wearing an ordinary sweater calmly walks across the frame. He isn't dressed like a cowboy. He isn't reacting to the action. And he clearly has no idea that filming is taking place. He was simply passing by. Instead of stopping the shoot, Mel Brooks watched the footage and made a surprising decision. Leave him in. The random pedestrian became part of the final film, an accidental extra who had unknowingly wandered into one of the most famous comedy endings ever filmed. It was a perfect example of Brooks' philosophy. Sometimes mistakes are funnier than anything you could plan. While the actors were embracing chaos on set, executives at Warner Brothers were becoming increasingly nervous. When studio leaders finally saw the finished film, their reaction was immediate. They hated it. Some believed the jokes were too offensive. Others thought audiences would be confused by the film's strange mixture of satire, slapstick, and surreal humor. One executive reportedly predicted the movie would destroy Mel Brooks' career. Rather than promoting the film aggressively, the studio quietly released it in only a handful of major cities. The strategy was simple. If the movie failed, the damage would be limited. If it caused controversy, the studio could distance itself from the project. But something unexpected happened. Audiences loved it. Word of mouth spread rapidly. Theaters began extending showings. Crowds returned for repeat viewings. Within weeks, the film that had nearly been buried became one of the biggest comedy hits of the year. By the end of its theatrical run, Blazing Saddles had earned over $100 million, an enormous success for the time. The movie that studio executives had dismissed as vulgar nonsense had become a cultural phenomenon. The road to success had been anything but smooth. In fact, the film nearly collapsed before production even began. The role of Sheriff Bart had originally been written with a very specific actor in mind, Richard Pryor. Pryor had helped write the screenplay, shaping many of the film's sharpest jokes and most daring ideas. His voice was deeply embedded in the character, but the studio refused to insure him. At the time, Pryor had a reputation for unpredictable behavior and a history of drug-related arrests. Without insurance, the production legally couldn't hire him. It was a devastating setback. Instead, the role went to Broadway actor Cleveland Little. Little approached the character differently than Pryor might have. Rather than explosive energy, he played Bart with calm intelligence and effortless confidence. The result was unforgettable. His quiet delivery made the satire even sharper, allowing the absurd situations around him to feel even more ridiculous. The casting problems didn't end there. Another key role, the mysterious gunslinger known as the Waco Kid, was originally given to an Academy Award-winning actor. But on the very first day of filming, the production came to a halt when it became clear the actor was struggling with severe alcohol withdrawal. Mel Brooks made the difficult decision to replace him immediately. In desperation, Brooks called someone he trusted, Gene Wilder. Wilder agreed to join the film almost instantly. He arrived on set the next day and began filming. His performance became one of the most beloved parts of the movie. With his soft voice, strange pauses, and unpredictable humor, Wilder created a character who felt both ridiculous and strangely wise. Together, Cleveland Little and Gene Wilder formed the emotional center of the film. Amid all the chaos, their performances gave the story something unexpected: heart. Looking back, it's easy to forget just how radical Blazing Saddles was when it first appeared. The film attacked racism directly. It mocked Hollywood traditions. It shattered storytelling conventions. And it did all of this while making audiences laugh harder than they expected. What makes the movie truly remarkable is that none of it happened by accident. The outrageous jokes, the chaotic production, the improvised moments, even the random pedestrian wandering through the final scene, all of it reflected a philosophy that Mel Brooks believed deeply. Comedy should be fearless. It should challenge people. And sometimes the best way to reveal the truth about society is to make it look completely ridiculous. That approach changed the future of comedy. Films and television shows that followed would borrow the same ideas: self-aware humor, fourth wall breaks, and satire that pushed boundaries. But few would ever match the pure unpredictability of Blazing Saddles. Because behind the laughter was something rare in Hollywood. A film that refused to play by the rules and somehow got away with it.